Hi, everyone. I think we're going to get started. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this Love Data Week Zoom session. Please feel free to share questions or comments in the chat at any time. Later today, you will receive a brief survey, and we would really appreciate your feedback. We also hope you will join us for other Live Data Week sessions and for our in-person open house on Friday. Thank you again for being here, and now I will turn it over to Yasmin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for taking the time out to spend some time to talk about course evaluations. So, for today, we will be briefly talking about structuring evaluations throughout the semester. Oh, okay. So, our objectives for today are just to look a little bit deeper into the different types of course evaluations that we can have throughout the semester, and then also looking at triangulated feedback to gather more insights from our students and the people that we're teaching throughout the semester, and then adding some more assessment resources to our toolkit. So before we begin, I'd like to gauge, and I know some of us don't teach, so I'd like to gauge kind of what your relationship status is with course evaluation. So in the chat, um, you guys can either reply committed or it's complicated. So for committed, if you guys have a steady ongoing conversation with students about, feelings and assignments and resources in the classroom the semester, then you guys would put committed. And then if you only talk about how things are going at the end of semester, you would put it's complicated in the chat. So if you talk about improvements throughout the semester, committed, if not complicated. Okay. Committed. Okay, so everyone seems pretty committed. All right, so this should be really easy for us today. So looking at the course evaluation gap that we mainly have is that if we're using end of semester course evaluations, the fixes are reactive, and so we want to be more proactive and we're thinking about assessing student learning and growth in the classroom. And so when we're looking at the triangulated feedback cycle, we can gather multiple data points to kind of see the clear patterns from student learning. And there's three main lenses that we can look at. We can look at the student experience, the learning evidence, and then also instructional design. So how are the resources and the alignment aligning with what students are showing and doing in the classroom? And so these 2 to 3 feedback methods are going to give you more data than, of course, the end of the course, end of semester course evaluation. So you'll be able to reflect and adjust accordingly throughout the semester. So when we're thinking about a cycle, it always repeats and is continuous. And so the important thing about being able to continue the cycle is gathering the feedback. And then after we gather, we want to interpret and kind of analyze what the feedback is telling us, and then adjust the feedback based off of student responses or colleague responses or whomever you want to support, add to your course evaluations. And then also, most importantly, being able to communicate back. Studies show that students are more comfortable in courses, and if they know that the teacher is going to use their feedback, and also increases end of course evaluation response rates if students see that their feedback is being taken into consideration. So the types, we're going to talk about 3 types, and there's more types. But the first one is an early term check-in. And so the purpose is to catch any issues or just to get to know your students a little bit earlier in the semester. And so there's different ways that you can do this. You can do a anonymous survey with a maximum of 5 questions, so 3 to 5 questions to kind of just gauge where students are at. Next, you can do a stop, start, continue prompt. So this is takes maybe about 2 to 3 minutes of your class to ask students what should be stopped, what should we start in class, or what should we continue in the class, and just giving additional feedback on what's going on. And then Also using 1 minute paper, so giving students a prompt to write on, and then giving them 1 minute to handwrite it or type it or email it to you so that you can have a better sense of where they are at that part of the semester, and if there's anything that you need to clarify before it gets to mid-semester. Next, we have belonging and engagement pulse check. So this can be done throughout, and it can be just based off of your preference. And so this can be done second week, fifth week, 10 week, 11 week. And this is something that can continuously be done throughout to just see the pulse of where students are at. So there's different ways you can do this as well, and different types of questions you can ask. And so similarly to the early check-in, you can use that same format of evaluation, but just asking different questions. And so from here, you would able to see are there any engagement barriers that your students are facing in the class, and then also get a gauge of sense of inclusion and support and how you can further support your students in your course in that particular semester. And then last, we have formative evaluations. And so you can tie that to a major milestone in your course to gather feedback on modules or assignments. And so if your course is assignment heavy, assessment heavy, being able to do it after a lab or a unit exam or a major project. And then again, being able to ask different questions in allowing students to have time for reflection on their preparation, but then also for the instructional materials that were given to them, to allow you as the instructor to see if there are any instructional gaps and if there's anything that should be reteached or any misalignment between what was taught in class, what students showed on the particular assessment, and then also being able to know like what needs to be refocused on towards the end of the semester, depending on the type of assessment you have. So if you have a summative assessment, being able to have more information on what that looks like for your students. So we are going to do an activity, and is it a pleasure for us to do it together, or do we want to do it in breakout groups? So the activity, we're going to look at course evaluations, and based off of what you do, whether you're an faculty or staff, you would just create a small um, plan for implementation plan for course evaluations. All right, we can do it together then. All right, so I'm going to put it in the chat as well. And so I just copied and pasted some course evaluation responses in the Word document. And so there's two options. There is an instructor A and then an instructor B. So all right, so we will look at from the staff lens. And so we will look to see kind of like what are like just the overall needs from the faculty member. So I'll give us maybe like 2, 3 minutes to look at the course evaluation. So it can be instructor A or instructor B. There's really no preference. It's up to you all. And then we can share out.
Yasmin, I'm sorry. Somebody had just walked into my office. Can you repeat the like what exactly are we doing?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
So we are going to look at the sample course evaluations, and we are just going to look at the results. So they're not, I didn't add all of the questions. So there's three um, Likert scale questions, and then there's comments. And so from there, we're just going to think about what are some areas of growth for this instructor. So it can be instructor A or instructor B, or if there aren't any areas of growth, we can also talk about it as well. So that's the first part. And then we're going to come back after the 3 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you.
We have 1 minute left. All right, so from the quick review from the sample course evaluations, it can be any instructor. What were some needs for either instructor?
I think for instructor one or instructor A, there was some miscommunications, especially for students saying, I don't know where the points went, just disappeared, magically gone. Um, or about yeah, and then just do better to answer students' emails, questions, and communicate. And then some assignments, being closed and not available, quizzes, not being available for review after they're done. So I think there's some communication issues here. If the professor could have reached out earlier on, in the semester to send out a quick pulse survey to see how students are doing. If they have any questions, then some of these communication problems might get addressed right away, and then they would know, oh, okay, so I'll make certain quizzes or assignments, still available after the fact, and then they can still review them. Um, yeah, so I feel like it's some communication issues with instructor A.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have communication issues, and you had suggested a pulse survey, which would fall in line with the different types of surveys, so the instructor could know where the students were at. Also, in the chat, we have better organization communication, um, providing more feedback for students in a timely manner, so that's a big one as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is this an online or an in-person course?
The first one is a in-person course. The second one was an online course.
Okay. Um, I would say there's also a calendar issue.
Okay.
If it wasn't clear when the instructor was going to respond or how she was going to respond or give feedback, that could be a problem.
Okay. And then from the problems that we've listed, what are some potential supports or opportunities that either as if you have taught this class or you have a colleague that you want to support, or if you are from the perspective of your staff member and you're helping a faculty with their course, what's some suggestions that you would give this particular instructor?
I think I would suggest to have maybe a quarterly, so or 1/3 of the semester, then check in with students. Or maybe at the very beginning, right, to get some expectations from the students, like how often do they expect their professors to, blah, blah, blah. And then share the results of this quick pulse survey with everyone, and then address with everyone, what your expectations are, and then see if, you know, what you can do to meet them in the middle if you cannot fully, uh, commit to, what they propose. But at least that's some open communication there. It doesn't need to take long, just a couple minutes, at the end of the course, say, oh, after you go through the syllabus and then have them fill out a quick survey, or even there and then you can address the results and then further explain your expectations. So I think I would suggest, at the one quick survey at the beginning, maybe one in the middle, and then one maybe towards the end. And that one will be for a future class. When teach this course again, and then some of the suggestions coming from the students will be hopefully directed at, oh, for a future class, how would you suggest to improve this course? Instead of, so for this course, what things weren't done, for example, because then you're really just getting frustrated, right? Getting students frustrated and thinking like, oh, these things I could have had, but then I didn't have. But help maybe involve them in the decision-making kind of stage, like saying, oh, for a future class, how would you, make some suggestions to, yeah, instead of having them just think what went wrong. I guess it's nuanced. Yeah.
Right. And you can always modify the questions that you're asking students just based off of the needs of the students. And we had a question.
No, I have more of like a comment. I apologize. I came in late. I got stuck at another meeting. But I know that when I was teaching in class, now all the classes I teach are asynchronous. One of the most effective things that I had done was I actually, as the instructor, welcomed the criticism. I said, hey, we're midway into the semester, a few ways into the semester. I would say anonymously, tell me what I could do to help you better. So just based off of what I see here, this survey will go out to the students like as something separate, not coming from the teacher, correct? Or the instructor. But maybe make it so that the instructor takes the onus and actually asks for ways that they can better support their student.
Right. The survey would be coming from the instructor, but I do know that a lot of people on the call are staff. So we also went through the lens of supporting instructors with creating a survey on how to share them with your students. So they would 100% be coming from the instructor so that the
Also, it's good to
instructor.
know.
Mhm.
Like I said, I apologize for coming in late. I'm sorry.
Completely fine. Yep. So that's a big thing to make sure that, the data that you want from the students, you're being able to be clear and the communication is clear and kind, but also coming from you so that you can use that data for future classes with them, but then also with your new students. So moving along, we don't have that much time left, but when we're thinking about mapping it out through the semester, and Ling had touched on this a little bit, and if anyone wants to add, what is the impact of doing it multiple times rather than just doing it one time at the end or the middle of the semester?
So I think if it's just one time, right, like we talked about, at the end, then the instructor won't be able to catch, what could have been improved, um, and then make adjustments to the syllabus or to the rhythm of the course or how often they're going to communicate with their students. So it's really just like we talked about, a little frustrating on the students' part. They're like, oh, I've been, for example, waiting for the whole semester to have a chance to share some of my ideas, but then I can only provide them at the end in the survey. So it might be a little frustrating for them. And then also frustrating on the for the instructor. The instructor will be like, oh, I wish I, could have had this data and then I can make improvement. So,
We also have some comments in the chat, Yasmin, as well.
Yes. So yes, being able to make adjustments in real time. And the one thing that's going to be and very important is making sure that students see that you were making those changes. With course evaluations and semester course evaluations, students can't see that those changes were made. And so also like being able to, after giving students that assessment or the survey, being able to open up class of, okay, this is what the survey was, and being able to share ways that changes are going to be made or things are going to be kept the same. Um, so yeah, so also opportunity to adjust plans. So if we needed to pivot, either reteach or share additional resources for students. So wonderful, thank you. So lastly, one thing just really wanted to highlight was making sure that we continue to okay. So keeping responses anonymous, there's a few ways you can do it, depending on how you want to submit or gather the feedback from students. So you can do a Qualtrics form. That way that you don't know who submitted it. You also can have students do uh, writing it in class, depending on how big your class is. You also can use a Google form as well to kind of get that data pretty quickly. And students can, you can put it on Brightspace. You can also have them scan like a QR code or do an exit ticket, depending on your mode for teaching. Or you can even do like a quick Vivox poll as well, to where you can share that information and store it for for future usage. All right, so we're gonna move along, and again, key takeaway is just making sure that we are consistent with collecting data, but then also looking at the data and then naming the data to students. That's the really important part, because the more we share results with students, it closes the loop and it increases the transparency so that students feel comfortable in class, excel in class, but then also do your course evaluations. And so here's also one more resource. It's just the different types of small course evaluations that we briefly went over. So with the 6 minutes we have left, do we have any questions, comments? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.